Okay, got it.
Would you like him to get started, or do you want to wait a few more moments?
Let's wait just another minute. It looks like
Okay.
people are jumping on right now. All right, let's get it going.
Rick, you feel good to go?
Anytime you guys want me to, yeah. Did you want to do like a little intro or anything, or no? I can introduce myself. That's cool too. So,
Yeah, let's do that.
all right. So, once I do an introduction, I'll pull up the PowerPoint, kind of go through that. So, Rick Woodstock with IPX 1031 Exchange. We're the lawyer's title sister company. We share the same parent company, which is very important when you're looking at doing a 1031 exchange. So I manage for IPX, the Arizona, New Mexico territory. So I'm pretty busy all over the place, but I'm always available for any questions or concerns when it comes to 1031. And did you want to open up the PowerPoint now? So visual for that side, I just go ahead and do that, or is it shareable?
Yeah, you're the host now.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so let's go into that. And we'll share my screen down here. Why is it doing that? And here we go. Oh, that's not the screen I wanted. Bear with me 1 second. I went to the wrong one. Let's try that one. Okay. So once I get this sorted out here, you should be able to see.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, perfect. But let's go to the beginning so you can see the full slide. There you go. Oh, that's my New Mexico one. That is not the one you want. Hang on 1 second here. As I'm getting this organized here, why is it doing that? I haven't been in New Mexico for a while. Yeah, that's definitely new. That's a 4-hour class, so we don't want to do that one. Drop out of here for a second, and I'm gonna skip this. I apologize. I'm locked. Oh, there we go. That's the one I want. Okay. Well, technical difficulty, but now we're all up and running. So like I said, I'm the area manager for Arizona, New Mexico for IPX. That there is my contact information. IPX is Investment Property Exchange Services is what IPX stands for. And we're a national company, just like Lawyer's Title is. And we're available to go onto our website, the national, or if you want to just type in a zip code or my last name with a / you'll get all the New Mexico, Arizona updated information as things change. So where we got a limited amount of time, because I can go on for hours and hours, but this information is going to just give you a basic understanding of what a 1031 exchange is, share a little bit refresher on the benefits, and give you some ideas on how to utilize 1031 exchange. because of course it's a tool that all real estate agents can use and clients that are buying real estate, but some do or do not know the particulars about it. So there's a lot of misinformation, we'll say, about that. And then if we got some time towards the end, I'll give you what I think is going to happen with the tax updates when it comes to capital gains tax. So I always like to start off with the three types of properties that we're working with because there's a lot of these questions or misinformation, and I do get a lot of phone calls on the primary residence exclusion. So this
Hey,
is just
Rick?
going to be, yeah,
Are we supposed to be seeing a PowerPoint right now?
yeah, you're not seeing it?
Nope.
Oh, well, let's go back then. I think you called it before we got too into the weeds here. Okay, I'll drop that down then. And what do you see on your screen now? It's
We're
blank.
seeing you, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, well, that's good. I'm going to open this here. Oh, there we go. So let me go back to share. And we'll pull this up and let's see if that works. Are you seeing anything now?
We are. Yep.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
going to go right back to the beginning then so that we got that. So that's first slide I covered. And there's the goals that I was describing. And there's the three property types. So, okay, everybody can see that? Perfect. Okay.
yes.
A little more technical difficulty than I'm used to. So anyway, we're on board now. So with the three property types, I've always like to describe the primary residence exclusion. Not so much you need a QI for that, which is what I am, but it's very important to keep this in mind, especially when you're dealing with a client that's going residential to commercial or vice versa. Or if they just have their residential property that they bought, that's their primary within a year. So that's where I get a lot of phone calls. If they just bought last year, had a pretty good gain, they contact me thinking that they can do a 1031 exchange because they found out from their tax advisor that they don't qualify for the primary residence. So that's something to keep in mind. So it might just be a little refresher. It's 2 out of the 5 years to qualify for the 121 primary residence exclusion. And that is 250 and 500,000 if you're filing jointly married couple. That numbers are not that great. The 500,000, especially with the market that everybody has this equity in their property. So there is some rumors that numbers are going to be increased. So that would definitely maybe move somebody out from their 3% interest rate and go with something like this. Get a message here, get over there. So keep that numbers in mind. There is mixed use properties where you can have a primary residence, like a fourplex where you occupy one property and the other 3 properties are going to be under the 1031 exchange, or it might be that you have a casita in the backyard, or you might be running your business out of your primary residence. All those things are something you would have a conversation with before you list your property to find out which tax is going to benefit you, which program and which one is going to be best for you. So primary residence exclusion. And then we all like to have this, especially this time of year, so we can escape the heat down in the valley, a second home vacation home. Unfortunately, with the second home vacation home, when it comes to capital gains tax, there is no exclusion like the primary residence, and there is no 1031 option available, unless that second home vacation home is also a short-term rental. So that's a popularity thing with when you have a second home, say up in Flagstaff, excuse me, that if you're occupying it for the majority of the time as your second home, but you're either want to downsize that or relocate that second home and you're thinking about selling it, start renting out the property, because the minimum amount that you have to rent the property out to qualify for it to be a 1031 exchange is 14 days a year. So keep that in mind. What's that?
That's what I was going to ask, Rick, is
Yeah.
for 1031s, whether it's commercial or going to be an investment,
Right.
you cannot be in that home, right? So you're saying if I rent my house out for 14 days out of the year and show proof, it doesn't have, I can 1031 it? Do you think
You
that's
can,
going to change?
no, that's been around since the beginning, and that's one of those myths that people don't realize. So I had a little place up in North Prescott. I've had it since 2017, and kids got bored. They're teenagers now, gone off to college. So we were preparing to sell it and maybe relocate it to Flagstaff. And what I started doing, so I don't have to pay the capital gains tax because I had some huge appreciation on it, I started renting out the property just the minimum 14 days. This was right around COVID time, so it kind of exploded. Everybody wanted to be up north, work from home type of thing. So it became a very successful Airbnb. But the minimum that I had to do just to qualify for it to be under a 1031 exchange is that 14 days a year, but have that reported on your taxes. So sometimes you might be renting it out to friends and family, which is okay, but you have to do a Schedule C or Schedule E. You're doing a profit and loss and have the minimum 14 days. Now, some of you are probably thinking, how does the IRS know you did 14 days? They really don't know, but the numbers have to make sense. So if you're only claiming $1,000 of income a year, that might be a question mark for the IRS. And if they explore into it, then you would have to have more proof. But make it official as possible that you're renting out those 14 days a year and claiming on your taxes. That's just the minimum. But there is, on the flip side, a minimum that you can occupy it if you're going 100% and want to do 1031 exchange. So we can get a little bit into that here towards the end if you got more questions on that, or do you have some more questions on that right now?
So if let's just say there's a homeowner
Right,
and they're wanting to sell within that 2 year mark,
right.
and they want to do a 1031 into another property, and
Mhm.
they rent out their home for 14 days. So let's say they decide that the property that they purchased the 1031 turns into their primary. Maybe they rent that out for 14 days minimum, right? Somewhere in that. Now they're not going to get in trouble if they change and it's now, right? You purchased it with
Yeah.
1031 and now you can say, hey, so as long as somewhere in there you can show with the IRS that you had a 14-day lease or somewhere 14 days time period.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
And you can change your primary, second home, or investment home back and forth. It just takes one tax return in between. So if it is your primary, you file your taxes. Now it's a second home or investment property. The IRS knows what you tell them. So whatever you don't tell them, and then you do like a 1031 exchange, or you try to claim something that hasn't been reported to the IRS prior, that's when they start asking questions. So if it's a primary residence, say in 2023, more likely if you sell it in 2024 to the IRS, they're going to think that that is primary residence. If it was claimed as an investment property in 2023, it's an investment property if you sell it in 2024. So
okay.
if as
And
long as you
obviously,
look, yeah,
sorry, and obviously that wouldn't even fall in because commercial straight up is just commercial. So
100% all
yeah,
commercial properties
yeah.
are investment properties, yes. So this only comes into play on your personal investments or if you're switching from commercial to primary. And I handle both transactions. I handle the residential and the commercial. So I see a lot of investors, they want to get more doors. They go from maybe 4 or 5 or even 2 or 3 single family or Airbnbs, and then their goal is to get into the commercial. So
Well,
they're,
I think this is great because I know there's
yeah,
a lot of people that purchase as FHA and then they feel like they're obligated in that for 2 to 3 years before they go find another property and they've
right.
accumulated others. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I
No, I
personally
mean,
have family members that are under the 12 months and they're like, we are not happy where we're at. We want to sell. So then they're like, well, I have to reduce my price because I need to stay within that originally purchased number, and they're hit with fees and all kinds of stuff. So this is actually good
absolutely.
info. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we help with the strategies on that. I'll give you a quick example. I had a client out in Cape Creek. He called me up with his primary residence transaction, and this was about maybe 8 months ago. Bought it a year and a half prior, so he didn't qualify for the primary residence. So he was going to hang on to it for another 6 months just to get the 2 tax returns. But he was made over $1 million. I think it was like $1.5 million in gain on that property in that period of time. So his call was, well, look, I'm going to get the $500,000 exclusion, but what about this other $1 million that I have to pay capital gains tax on? That's huge. That could be a $300,000 check to the IRS. So just with that phone call and a couple questions that we asked him, or I asked him, I was like, okay, so you just use this house as your primary residence? He says, yes. And then he started talking about his properties he's looking to buy into, and he started talking about horses. And I go, oh, do you have horses on your current property? He says, yes. And he has a small business that he's running out of his primary residence as stables. So he had over 12 horse stables that he was renting out to other people as his business. And he wanted to buy a new property that had more stables and more acreage. So right as soon as he said that, that's a mixed use property. So that property could be the $1 million that he was paying capital gains tax on. We're able to make that portion of it investment. So he can buy a larger property to cover that. And then the other primary residence covered up to the 500,000. So always talk to the experts when you're in the planning stages or you have your property listed. So there's a ton of different options and strategies you can look into versus closing and trying to figure it out after the fact. So second homes, keep that in mind that if your clients are planning to sell that, the snowbirds, all those properties can be converted into investment properties just by doing that 14 days a year. And then, of course, the third type of property is the investment property, which is 100% of all commercial transactions. And it doesn't have to be one for one. So that's the other big myth, is that like kind has to be exactly what you're selling. I had a client last week. We're doing an exchange, multi-million-dollar exchange on an industrial property out of New Mexico. And he sold a large parcel of 10 acres last year. And he was using that money to buy a self-storage property in Texas. And he paid the tax on it. He didn't do a 1031 exchange because he didn't realize the raw land is like kind for self-storage units. So he paid the taxes on it, and having a conversation with him on doing his exchange on industrial to another industrial, he realized that, having that conversation with me, and he was really irritated because obviously it happened a year prior, nothing you can do about it, but now he's aware of it the hard way. Okay, so those are the three property types, and then this is mainly the main reason why you would even consider doing a 1031 exchange. These are the current tax rates. So they're probably going to do nothing but go up. But currently they're anywhere from 15 to 20% federal. So that's going to be determined on what your tax bracket is on the year of the sale, which means that, okay, 15%, you like to pay that, but it's going to more likely be 20% because they count the income that you made from the sale as your taxable income for that year. So very few will fall into the 15%. Most of us are probably going to be in the 20% range. And then, of course, depending on where the property is located, you'd be paying anywhere from 0 to 13.3 state capital gains tax. I'm sure you can all take a guess at which state 13.3 is. It's our lovely neighbor state there on the ocean that pays the higher tax. And here in Arizona, we're fairly in the middle range at 5% is what we pay for capital gains tax. So worst case, if you did pay the tax, or what you're deferring would be 20 plus 5, you're at 25% for the state and federal capital gains tax. Where the big one comes in, especially in commercial, and the use of depreciating your property quicker, or your property values and quicker with doing some of those types of things where you accelerate your depreciation, 25% of recapture on the sale of the property. So keep that number in mind. Everybody's depreciation number is going to be different depending on the property and how long they've owned it, but it is a 25% recapture there. And then there's the PPACA tax, otherwise known as the low Obamacare tax, where you're paid capital gains tax to support the affordable health care tax. So that's just most tax advisors just add that on top of the federal capital gains tax. My take and what we're looking at now in Washington, the current administration was talking about a 45% capital gains tax rate. With last year when they did a white vote in the Senate and the House, the 45% capital gains tax flat rate that they wanted, the current administration wants, Didn't fly. They came to a compromise and they were saying that it might be more around 25%. So I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but that's what I'm hearing, that you might see a capital gains tax rate federally, maybe a flat at 25%. Do we have any questions on that so far? All right. So like I was kind of suggesting there a second ago, this is where the cross comes in. So when I have this presentation in front of my residential agents, I always keep in mind that they need to get a friend that is a commercial agent or have somebody in their office, because this is the transition most of my clients are looking to do. They start off with a single family investment property, maybe a duplex, single family, maybe even a fourplex, and then they want to get into multifamily, industrial, and so on in the commercial side. So it's definitely 100% that like kind, and definitely you can do that with 1031 exchange. This is another one that I see a lot of my clients do, is that they're hedging their bets, so they're not all stuck into one market. Some investors back in 2005, 2006 invested all in Phoenix or Florida or Vegas markets. And then, of course, when the market went down, those areas got hit harder than some other areas. So having that diversification, having properties in multiple states might offset some of the states that are not doing as well. And here's what you probably all want to see as a refresher, is the actual timeline of the 1031 exchange. So up leg, down leg, we use a little different terminology in my world, but it's called a delayed exchange, forward exchange. So your client that's selling their property, the investor, is the exchanger selling the relinquished property to the buyer. So that side of the equation is pretty much the same as everyday transaction. The only difference is when you're doing a 1031 exchange, the money does not go to the investor or the exchanger or your client. It goes to the qualified intermediary, the QI. So right there at the close of escrow, we give instructions to escrow to send those funds to us, and then we hold them and keeping them in compliance with the rules. So at that moment, when it does close or you have a constructive sale, that's your day zero. So with the exchange, a forward exchange, a late exchange, your first period, that is the crunch time, is the 0 to 45 days. So they're not business days, those are calendar days. So of course, coming with the holidays, the 4th of July or over the Christmas holidays, those timeframes, even if it's a holiday, count. So be selective and careful on your close of escrow because you want to make use of those 45 days as much as possible. Now, there's a couple different ways to identify. The most common is the 3 property rule, where you just give us 3 properties within that 45 days. You pick from one of those 3, or you buy 2 of those 3, or you buy all 3 of those properties, and then close within the 180 days. Another rule is the 200% rule, where this is if you're buying multiple properties. So say you have a $5 million transaction, you can identify as many as you want, up to 10 million. So 200% rule is just 2 times the gross sales price. Now, in a hot, crazy market that we experienced in the last few years, that 45 days was a crunch, especially in residential and sometimes even multifamily commercial. Can you get more than 45 days? The answer is maybe. If there's a natural disaster that happens where the property is located or where the investor is located. So if the investor is living in Florida, has property in Arizona, and a hurricane came through, you may be getting an extension, but it has to be a national disaster declared on the IRS website. So you might get some time frame there on top of that 45 days. Don't bank on that. What I recommend is, if you're in control, especially in commercial, you can have that close of escrow pushed out as far as you can. Negotiate, especially in a seller's market, you're in the driver's seat. You can control when that property closes. So instead of having maybe a 60-day close, you can do maybe even a 90-day close. So whatever that time period before the actual official timeline starts in the exchange, you can be out there doing your due diligence, putting offers out on new properties before the official clock even starts. So that's what was happening in the last few years. A lot of my clients, commercial residential, were already knew what they wanted to buy in that 45 days. So instead of identifying, I was just getting contracts, usually right after the period of time. And then, of course, the 180 days is plenty of time to close for the most part once you know what you're looking to buy. Any questions on the timeline? All right.
Yeah, Rick, actually, I have a question real quick back on that,
Sure, go ahead.
that chart. So commercial, understood, that's easy. You're upgrading from a few, like someone divesting smaller, single family homes like you had pointed out before. You're having problems identifying, maybe you're in a partnership with these homes, meeting the 45th day. I'm actually talking to somebody at IXP about a reverse exchange. Do you
Right.
have an abstract on that? Is that coming up here in this deck?
I can, but yeah, reverse is super popular right now.
Yeah.
And that's basically everything you're looking at on the screen now, but backwards. But the trend is right now that I'm seeing with the reverse, there's a few different models for the reverse. There's a reverse where you're just buying the property up front and gives you 180 days to sell your current relinquished property. And then there's the reverse built to suit, and then there's a reverse improvement exchange. All of those are the reverse department is just super busy right with now. So some are hedging the market. They want to buy now, sell their current property later, or they came across a really good deal. So they're using the reverse structure. So it's a little bit more complicated with the reverse as far as, well, I shouldn't say complicated, but there's a couple hurdles that you have to cross doing the reverse exchange. So if we switch this screen around, you're buying the replacement property, you got 180 days to sell your current property relinquished. The two hurdles that you have to deal with is our fee. So a normal transaction, $1.5 million or less, is about $1,000 to do that type of exchange. If you're doing a reverse exchange, they start at around $7,000.
Right.
Why are they so expensive is because we have to actually take ownership and create an EAT, which is essentially just an entity that acquires that replacement property, and then we park it for the 180 days until you sell your current property.
Okay.
So a lot of moving compartments there. So the cost is a little higher, so that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle that usually wipes out a lot of people is that financing. So if they were doing an SBA loan or trying to buy that property through a lender, it has to be a non-recourse loan.
Yeah.
So similar to like a bridge loan or hard money loan or soft money loan or cash. So
In
just
this
because.
instance, it's a commercial with a DSCR. So
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are the situations that work with this type of strategy. I have a client that buys shopping centers across the United States, and they 100% buy every property under the reverse structure. And then they go back through their inventory, which is massive, and also has clients that they manage under that. So they go back and say, look, I just bought this shopping center, strip center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's a really good deal. We bought it for under market value. Which property do we have in our inventory that we can exchange into it? Or
Okay.
then they don't have one, then they go through their other clients, say, here's the property, you want to exchange into it, we can do that. And if worst case scenario, they're at the 180th day, they just have another new property. So that's the way that they kind of hedge their investments.
Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So just wrapping up on the forward exchange, that 180th day, the only thing that becomes an issue is if you're closing the last quarter of the year, because that 180 days, April 15th is going to come before the 180th day. So that's what the forward tax filing deadline is. So in that case, if you can close before April 15th, that's going to be your deadline, or you would have to file for an extension to get the full 180 days on your exchange. Okay. So this is the identification portion of it. And everything has to be in writing. So we recommend not giving us any properties that you're interested in until you're under contract or you're at, say, the 44th day. Because if you give us 123 Main Street or in 567 Turbo Street, those properties are, and you change your mind and you give it to us in writing, of course, it has to be revoked with us, and that's more paperwork back and forth. So it's just easier to keep that list with your client and then just narrow it down, either be it under contract or the 44th day. So these are the rules that I mentioned earlier. There's the two rules. One is that 3 property rule, which is the easiest because we don't care about the fair market value. But if they're buying more than 3 properties, that's when the 200% rule would come in. It's 2 times the gross sales price. So like I said, it was 5 million. Now you can identify as many as you want, up to 10 million. But we have to do an accounting to make sure that the value is under that 200% or 2 times the gross sales price. There is one exception to this too as well. So we just recently had a client that went over the 4 properties, over the 3 property rule. He had 4 that he identified, and he was over by $100,000 on the 200% rule. Good thing is that he wanted to buy all 4 properties. So we're able to use the one exception rule, which he was able to still has successful exchange by buying all 4 properties and going over both of these property rules here. Okay, so this is just giving you the example because this is the biggest thing that comes an issue is what is like kind, raw land, commercial and residential, a combination of all are considered like kind. Also, there is a list of other ones that are unusual. Right now, I'm doing a mineral rights out of New Mexico. Tenants in common interests, that's something that we would want to look at structuring on a property because if you're in commercial, a lot of those commercial properties are under LLCs or subcorp or under corporations, and they may change. So once you have a property that is in a partnership or LLC, when they go to sell it, one property or one investor partner does not want to go forward with the exchange. He wants to cash out. So that's where you would have to do restructuring of the vesting of the property. And the most common or the flexible most is the tenants in common interest. So you could change it from partnership to 2 partnerships or 2 owners that are invested in the same property under the tenants in common. And then each partner can do their option, either pay the tax or do the exchange into their own interest. Want to find out about that if there's going to be any structuring on vesting way before it's even listed, because it can get a little murky in the waters, especially if your partner is not interested in revesting the property. There's other options. That's pretty much when it comes to commercial properties. We're having a lot of conversations with that if there's multiple partners, if there's multiple ownership, or there's only one ownership but multiple members under that one ownership. So a lot of structuring, a lot of upfront conversations to make it best for tax purposes. So we offer all that free. It's just a matter of getting on board with a conference call or meeting in person to figure that all out. Now, if it's coming out of our lovely state next door, California, rule of thumb there is 1 year prior to the sale that you can do any changes to vesting of the property. So just keep that in mind. 30-year leases or more. So they might be doing an option to buy the property and not transfer title, but it's a 30-year lease. That's another way to exchange interest out of the property without paying capital gains tax. So a lot of those things we can uncover and have conversations about with your tax advisor, your client, et cetera, to make sure that that's going to be successful. Any questions on that side? All right. So here is the process. It's pretty simple. Find an investment property, get it under contract, put it in escrow, and then contact us, QI, to get things set up. But of course, I'm working with transactions 100+ million, and sometimes they're a year out that I'm working on these properties. Current market, I'm working on some larger transactions, and they just keep getting extended out too. So we're available to have any of those conversations well in advance. The earlier you get us involved, the better. But at the last minute, you want to have the exchange set up prior to close of escrow, because Once it closes on the property, it's not eligible for 1031 exchange. So I'm going to stop sharing now and open it up to any questions that you may have or anything that you guys want me to discuss. There we go. Perfect. Is there any questions, or is there anything that in particular you'd like me to go over with?
I thought that was great. So listing a property, obviously we would reach out, ask you questions, or the client, or both, or
Yeah.
and I know it said you got involved once there's a contract, but I think depending on the property, you might be involved before that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It just depends on the property and the structure, but anytime there's a partnership involved, earlier the better, especially if they're not going to stay together going forward. But yeah, so the reverse, Tom discussed the reverse exchange. I don't have a slide on it because usually I do this class for 3 hours. So this is an hour, so I'm just clip notesing everything. But on the reverse built to suit is become very popular now, where you might sell a building, buy a piece of land. Of course, you sell a building for $5 million. You buy the land for maybe 500,000. That's well, let me back up just so everybody knows. What's considered like kind is not, like we said, it's all real estate, but it's more or less a dollar amount. So if you sell a $5 million property, you have to buy at least a $5 million property minus commissions and closing costs. So roughly that'd be about 4.9, maybe 4.950 is what you would have to reinvest. Now, partial exchanges are acceptable. You would just be paying a minimum, or so you'd be deferring whatever amount that you buy in the new investment property. So if you're 4.95, or just round off 4.9 is what your net sales price is, you buy property for 4 million, you'd be paying capital gains tax on 900,000. That's what they call the boot portion of the exchange. So that's acceptable, but get with your tax advisor because you want to know what your basis is on that property. So if the basis is $4 million, then you're only buying $4 million, the exchange is not really going to help you. You want to buy at least above what the basis or what the original sales price is. And if they've owned it for a long time, then you want to factor in what the depreciation is to come up with that new basis. Get in the mud there a little bit. That's more CPA talk, but just keep that in mind that it is an option to do a partial exchange.
I think that's a good, because we do run into that of what if someone wants to develop that land and it's turning into a small, maybe they're going to build properties, houses or condos. So unfortunately that can't be, like, selling them individually can't be a 1031, right? Because you're limited, and or like what?
There's options. So I'm working on a client right now that's doing that exact same situation where he's selling a $5 million property and he's buying $1 million lot. He's doing a built-to-suit exchange. So there's two types of built-to-suit exchanges. One is useless, in my opinion, because that's a safe harbor one, and you have 180 days to build out your raw land. And we all know 180 days will not get you anywhere.
No, yeah, I know.
Useless. But where we're a Fortune 300 company backed by a lot of financial, there's a non-safe harbor exchange. So what that is, it's based on case study. There was, you might have heard of Bartell Drug Store. A lot of them in California and the Pacific Northwest. They fought the IRS because they wanted to build out new drugstores, and 180 days was enough time. So they won on case law. So it's not a ruling yet under safe harbors, but it's a non-safe harbor. As long as your CPA gives the blessing, we can go up to 3 years on a built-to-suit exchange. Mm-hmm.
So Rick, I've got a question for you along those lines. You may have answered this, but it's just very complex for my brain here. So I need to really dumb it down. Here we go. Okay. So back to the scenario that I'm dealing with. Few single family homes, divesting, trying to get into multifamily. Or Or as you say, raw land, build a suit specifically for storage units that may have a franchisor. Okay.
Right.
So, so you're saying that in that scenario, let's just say the whole deal falls through for entitlement purposes during the due diligence phase, what do
Okay.
you do with that money? I mean, I guess,
If the reverse structure is already set up.
yeah, if we've already sold the assets, they're parked with you guys. We're in the build to suit. We can't get entitlement. The deal falls through. Yeah.
Well, worst case scenario is that we would just drop off title and it would go up to the full course of 180 days or 2 years or whatever the non-safe harbor ruling was, or that we set up initially. And then you just own that property. We just drop off and it becomes that's worst case scenario.
Right, but I think you might have answered this. It would, let's just say the property is only 250,000, but you were sitting on $1 million, in divestitures.
Yeah, so if you're still within the 45-day window, you could identify other properties. Or if you are in the 45-day window, I always suggest, if that's the one deal you want, the one raw land, and this is the direction you're going with your client, always throw in a couple extra properties. One that I always suggest throwing in, it's not great for brokers, but it's the DST as a backup. Are you familiar with those, the Delaware Statute Trusts?
No.
Yeah, they're not great for you guys, but they're sometimes work for clients. They're Delaware statute trusts. They're similar to a TIC, a tenants in common transaction, but these ones are regulated. So there was one that was an Amazon warehouse down in Tucson that was super popular. So you could identify a few different DSTs, maybe that Amazon warehouse, it's not available, we'll say that hypothetically, and then the property that you're going to buy into. So things fall apart, but you got that backup because you identified a DST. So then worst case is you just park your money into that Amazon DST for a couple years, 3 to 4 years, and then exchange out of it and then complete the project. So these are type of the strategy questions that come up, and we're there to help and offer those ones out there for you. But the more and over that you identify, the better, because then that gives you more options if things fall apart. And
Yeah. Okay.
we're dealing with real estate, so nothing is guaranteed, of course, until it's done. So throw in as much as possible on that end of it. So the DST is, like I say, an option, but the returns kind of stink in my opinion. They're more for backup, like we just talked about, and or your client might be in their later years and doesn't want to manage any properties on their own. So the DST is managed by the sponsor, and they just give you mailbox money. But the returns on those are like 4.5 to 6.5. So not superbly great, but you also factor in that you might be saving 30%, or you're saving at least 25 to 30% capital gains tax too. So
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick, that was awesome. What is there, and this could have changed, residential, you've got to identify minimum 3 properties. Is that correct?
Residential or commercial.
Okay, so that was my question, is commercial, how many can you identify? And is there a max to residential or commercial? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's the 3 property rule, which can be a mixed bag of residential and commercial, and just 3 units. One can be DST as a unit, and one can be the raw land, or one can be another commercial building. Then there's that 200% rule, though, I mentioned a little bit ago. So that one is if you got a $5 million gross sale on the relinquished side, or on the up leg side, that 5 million times 2 is how many you can identify up to. So in that case, it'd be up to $10 million limit. So you can squeeze as many as you want in there, but you have to keep it under 10 million. But if you're planning on buying a ton, I had one the other day that kind of blew both rules. He came up and said, look, I want 26 properties that he wanted to identify, and it was a $500,000 raw land. So way above the 3 property rule, way above the 200% rule. So we had to say, look, you got to change this. That's not going to work. You can't just go on LoopNet and pick every property that you want to buy and say that's what you're identifying. So there is a limit. The 200%, so 2 times or 3 units is what your limits are. But the no limit is that one exclusion where if you plan on buying 5 properties and you identify 5 and it's over 200%, and of course over the 3, but as long as you're going to buy all 5, that's acceptable too as well. So there's a limit, but not a limit. So
Yeah. Well, and
yeah.
I think working with you is super important so that
Right.
you
Yeah.
can
So
do
we,
that
our
with
my team, we will
Yeah.
help with that whole process and remind you, like, hey, we're on day 40. I have nothing from you yet. What are you thinking? And we're working on a couple right now like that. So some of them are like, oh, what's this DST thing? So if they're identifying it, they're doing their due diligence on it, and then maybe or maybe not close on it if they can't find something else. Syndication type properties are super popular right now too, which is similar to the DST. That's just where they're not regulated as much. So that's like if you got a property that somebody bought for $10 million multifamily, but wants to have other investors come in on it with them. So they're just selling interest, tenants in common. So you can identify that if you know of one, and use that as your due diligence that you're going to as a backup too as well if you're at that 44th day and you can't find anything. We try to strive to make sure that every exchange is successful, even in crazy times and crazy markets. For the most part, we're still in about the 80 to 90 range that successful exchanges, just with the help of finding other properties.
Are you seeing it picking up or slowing down, or how are you seeing the market?
I like to say our industry is a good indicator on what's happening. First quarter of the year, a little sluggish in the commercial. Residential was strong, and it kind of flips back and forth. Right now, commercial is upticking. I have, and I do about maybe 200 exchanges a month, residential, commercial mixed in. And right now, there's a lot of larger deals coming in on the commercial side. Well, like I said in this start of this presentation, they're getting pushed out. So they're starting to come back, but when they're supposed to close at the end of June, they're exercising their additional extension for another 30 days, timing the market, whatever they're doing on that strategy. But sweet spot, the $5 to $10 million properties, definitely seen an increase in those. And I market and I'm able to do classes like this in New Mexico and Arizona, but I do exchanges all across the United States. So I'm doing a ton coming from California right now, residential, buying commercial. So I have a client now that sold Santa Monica property for $8 million and buying one investment property that's going to be eventually their primary residence. They're going to rent it out for 2 years and then move into it on the 3rd year, which is acceptable. And then the rest of the money they're putting into multifamily. Multifamily slash, what was the other property they're looking at? They're looking for an RV property, but I think that's in Texas that they're looking to put that property.
I was going to ask, are you seeing people selling more in Arizona or buying more in Arizona coming from?
The combination of that. So a lot still coming in, not as much as years prior, but and I'm seeing a lot come back from exchanges that I did a couple of years ago, or in particular Florida and Texas. I'm seeing a lot of those investors now want to buy back here again. So especially Florida, that's a big one, but that's more in residential than it is commercial. But a big industrial demand that I see. And I see a lot of industrial raw land here in Arizona. I think the raw land is probably the top big deals that I'm working on right now that are selling in Arizona. So $50 to $100 million land transactions are huge right now, selling to developers. And I'm sitting on 2 of those deals that were supposed to close this month, but they're exercising their due diligence or their extensions. So they're not closing exactly on time frame. But yeah, I positively think that the market is swinging upwards a little bit on the commercial, which is good because that's where my focus is. Residential just kind of falls in my lap, and the commercial is the ones that I have to work a lot harder for. So, and I see an uptick on that for sure.
That's great info. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other scenarios or questions or?
It's quiet in here.
Yeah,
I do
I might have thrown a
appreciate
lot of
it.
information at you guys.
No, it's great. It's always, I think sometimes agents get stuck in their own bubbles. So I like to hear what other states are experiencing. And maybe if prices and taxes have gotten too high in certain states or there's weather issues, does that again drive people back to Arizona?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and what does that look like growth wise? And I think it even market wise, people, the news just portrays doom and gloom. So
Right.
it's nice to actually hear people that are in it that
Right.
have boots on the ground, which you do,
Right.
and can provide positive influence, I believe. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, and like I say, I also see what's going on in other states. We're the way IPX is set up, we're national, so we compete with our East Coast counterparts a lot. And so the first half of the year, East Coast was doing more volume than we were. And they have more population than the West Coast does. But we, in the last 3 months, have been beating the East Coast all the time. Hopefully, there's nobody online for my company, other than you, Billy. But you're not going to say anything. But no, so we're beating out the East Coast right now in commercial transactions and larger transactions, and that's California, Colorado, the Pacific Northwest, Arizona, New Mexico. That's what makes in our region we call the West Coast.
awesome. Well, if there's anything we can do to help you out, obviously we share this with our brokerage and agents that are onboarding. And if we can get your information out to other states or agents that we know, gladly we will do that.
And another thing too, I can help you guys out with too. If
Yeah.
you have any properties that I have brokers that send me their listings or their ones that are going to be listings.
Yeah.
I have clients looking for investment properties all the time. So if you
Yeah.
think you have a good fit, just shoot that email over to me on that listing, and I
Okay.
share it with all my clients because I want them to have a successful exchange. So
Super. Okay. I appreciate that. I didn't know that.
yeah. Mhm.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. Does anyone
Yeah.
else have any questions? Landon, this was awesome. So thank
Good,
you.
love to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick. That was very informative.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad I could help. All right, you guys, if there's no other questions, I'll let you go. And
Super.
Landon want to provide my contact information to everybody, or?
Yeah, we'll get it out tomorrow.
Yeah. Can you email the your slide, because we can attach that
Yeah.
with our class to the brokerage.
Absolutely. I
Okay.
will do that.
Super.
I'll send it to you, Landon.
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you.
great. Thank you again,
Thanks,
Rick.
everyone.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good
Thank
rest of the day.
you.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye.
Bye-bye.